I booked a trip for myself to Disney. I'm not, no, I don't know what happened. Something happened and you can't take the trip. Your pet pelican came down with pneumonia and he needs constant love and affection. And so you have to cancel the trip to Disney. How do you think the kids will feel about that? When you hear the phrasal verb, go over, what's the first meaning that pops into your head? Most phrasal verbs, you'll know at least one meaning. The interesting thing, of course, being that there are quite a few. What's the first one that pops over? Pops into your head. Pops over. Goes over your head. It probably is that one. You probably have heard that went over my head. It went over my head. Now that could have a physical meaning. Okay, here you are, standing here, and there's a thing, a ball, let's say, and it goes doo, and it goes over your head. That is the ball's relationship to you as it moves, right? But then there's the other meaning of over my head, which means I don't understand it. Someone makes a joke, a very smart joke perhaps, and it's so smart that I don't understand it. And everyone's laughing, ha 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 ha, but I'm not because I don't get it. And then I say, I think that went over my head, or everyone starts laughing at me and they say, ha, it looks like that went over your head. Well, it's the same idea. It kind of misses you. It doesn't hit your brain, right? You don't have the context to understand it. That might be the first meaning. Of course, I don't know for sure. So let's explore the more, let's call it a basic meaning, and then get into some of the others as well, okay? A breathtaking view of the valley met us when we went over the hill. So think about that. Okay, here's the hill, and we're walking. We get to the top of the hill, and so that's us going over the hill, and we're now going down the hill. Going over the hill is going up, reaching the top, and going back down. But when we are going over this hill, at some point in this process, we see a stunning landscape, mountains and trees changing colors and clouds, and there's an albatross flying through the sky, and a phoenix, and a volcano erupting in the distance, or whatever it is that a breathtaking view would be, right? Great. So that's a kind of physical meaning. Go over the fence. Nobody is looking. Okay, so we're in line for something, and there's a fence there, and we're supposed to be in line, but I see that no one's looking, and I say to you, hey, just go over the fence. That would be physically climbing the fence, over it. Okay, simple meaning. Same thing as the ball went over his head, right? Okay. But then we get into this territory of things going over people's heads. I gave you the example of the joke, right? That kind of went over my head. I don't understand it because I'm a dum-dum. But you went over my head with something that you should have brought to me is another one that is also kind of non-physical. We're not talking about a physical thing going over anyone. Here is Tina, the big boss. And here is Tony. And Tony is managed by Tina. Tony reports to Tina, right? Tina's Tony's boss. And here's me. And I have a concern, a complaint. We won't say what it is, but it does have something to do with the quality of coffee being served in the office. Come on, guys. And so I go directly to Tina and I say, Tina, what the heck? We have a beautiful office, but you're serving crap coffee. How am I supposed to do my job with this quality of coffee, Tina? And then Tony finds out that I talk directly to Tina. Well, you're supposed to follow the chain of command or whatever. And so Tony then says to me, you went over my head. That means you're supposed to talk to me, but you went directly to Tina, my manager, and now that's causing problems for me. So whenever this happens, we can say it's going over someone's head. Going over someone's head. Okay? So we have this kind of non-physical feeling, right? This non-physical usage that is kind of connected to the physical usage, which would be, for example, the ball going over the head. Okay, but let's now go over, spoilers, let's go over another meaning. Everyone goes over to Grandma's house for Thanksgiving. This is true. In fact, Thanksgiving is coming up for me, and I will be going over to my grandma's house for Thanksgiving to eat some delicious food. Although I'm not a big fan of turkey, it's a bit dry. But the other stuff is really good. So that simply means we're here, and here's Grandma's house. And we go from here to Grandma's house. We often, instead of just saying go to that place, we say go over to that place, right? If two people are standing close to each other, 10 feet away, one says to the other, come over here, instead of just come here. It helps us hint at the movement of going across something or from here to there. It doesn't add tons of meaning in this case, but it does give us, I feel like, a sense of the movement, a sense of it, even though we go to Grandma's house for Thanksgiving has the same basic meaning. Okay, when are you coming over? That would be someone asking. When are you coming over? Come over means I'm here, you're there. Come over. When are you coming over? Oh, we're going over in about 20 minutes. If you wanted to say we're coming over in 20 minutes, that's totally fine. We're coming over in 20 minutes. We'll be there in 20 minutes. But going over is just as natural and very common. Again, why do we need the over? I don't even know. I think it just gives us that sense. Okay, now, there's a really interesting example here that I cannot claim as my own, given as a suggestion, and that is he's meaning he has gone over to the Conservative Party. Okay, now, this is no longer physical, right? So you have two parties, let's say the Liberal Party on the left, the Conservative Party on the right, and you have someone who has been on the left their entire lives, then they've changed for some reason. They've defected. It's hard for me to say it without saying it. They've switched parties, okay? But instead of saying switch, that feels so sudden. It's like a light switch. It's not like that, right? When you change your allegiance, when you change your priorities in life, it's a gradual process. So I think we get a feeling of the movement. So many things happened to Stacy in the Liberal Party that she has decided that she's fed up with it, and now she's going over to the Conservative Party. It's a movement. There's something happening. It might be gradual. It might not be sudden. It might happen in stages, right? And I feel we can get a sense for that when we say go over instead of something like switched. Switched feels so, I don't know, it feels so sudden, right? I switched parties. That's like a light switch, and it's just very sudden. I don't like it as much as go over in this specific case. Okay. I'd like to spend a few minutes going over your IELTS results. I'll go over the instructions once more. They went over everything that led up to the disaster and discovered a flaw in the design. Okay, so here, what are we talking about? Something like review, something like maybe could be used as summary, something like explain, something like examine, and none of those captures it totally exactly, but I'm trying to give you a feeling, right? Okay, so I'd like to spend a few minutes going over your IELTS results. You took the IELTS test. You got scores from all the different parts: writing, speaking, listening, and reading. And now I'm your teacher. You show me the results, and I want to talk with you about them. We'll look at them. We'll talk about each one by one. We'll try to understand why you did better in one part as opposed to another. And this is also something that happened in the past, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something that's going to happen in the future or something that's just there in front of us. Let's go over it. Let's carefully look at it. Let's examine it, right? And let's try to understand it. This process we use go over, right? I said earlier, let's go over some examples. So I made some examples to help explain what go over means and how to use it. And if I say, now let's go over them, let's talk about them, let's review them, let me tell you about them, let me explain them to you. So we're kind of talking around these ideas, right? But also we get this feeling of movement. We're starting from not doing anything, and we will have finished it when we're done. And we're reaching a sort of end point from a beginning point. So I feel there we also get a sense of movement, right? Okay. The instructions, I'll go over the instructions. There it's more like just explaining. You all listen, and I'm just going to talk. Again, the feeling of movement. I'm starting now. Rule number 1. No, what are rules? I can't think of any rules. No dancing in the lobby. Of course, no dancing in the lobby. Rule number 2. Do not eat cotton candy during very important board meetings because no one will take us seriously. Rule number 3. Pants required at all times unless it's business casual Friday. So we're now talking about them one by one, right? You may bring pets to work only on Bring Pets to Work Day, but no turkeys allowed. Only dogs, cats, and pelicans. Okay, so we're going over the instructions, or we're going over the rules. We're kind of doing it one by one. So there it's kind of a sweeping thing that happens. There's a feeling of a process, right? Okay. They went over everything that led up to the disaster and discovered a flaw in the design. Richard Feynman, world-famous physicist who came up with Feynman diagrams, which are very cool to learn about, and contributed a lot to the field of quantum electrodynamics. He was involved in the process of trying to figure out what happened, the investigation into the Challenger disaster. So Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off in the 80s, maybe 80s. I think it was in the 80s, and exploded shortly after liftoff. Oh no. So what happened was they brought in a commission of people who investigated the disaster, and Feynman was part of that group, and they reviewed. So there you're looking at what happened in the past. You still use go over. But there the feeling, instead of covering something like instructions, let's go over the instructions, let's go over the examples, there it's like looking back into the past and reviewing things from the past that happened, the evidence of those things carefully. It gives us a feeling of like Sherlock Holmes looking through a magnifying glass at all the things that happened, and this, okay, that, or a crime scene, right? We look into the past and then we go over what happened, everything that led up to the Challenger disaster, and discovered a flaw in the design. The issue was there were some O-rings in a part of the space shuttle that when they would expand and contract due to temperature changes, it would potentially allow some things to leak out, right? And it was a cold day, and they decided to launch, and the O-rings expanded but didn't contract, and so it caused the explosion, something like that. Anyway, that probably is not particularly interesting to you. We need to look at one more set of examples for go over. Last one here. I told the kids we'd have to reschedule our trip to Disney. It didn't go over well. My presentation yesterday went over pretty well, but I was so nervous. All right. Totally different, right? Think about what's happening here. I told the kids we'd have to reschedule our trip to Disney. It didn't go over well. Okay, several kids. Everyone's excited about next week's trip to Disney, but something happens, right? Happens. I booked a trip for myself to Disney. And I'm not, no, I don't know what happened. Something happened and you can't take the trip. Your pet pelican came down with pneumonia and he needs constant love and affection in order to make it through this difficult time. And so you have to cancel the trip to Disney. How do you think the kids will feel about that? Think of them, these 3 kids, as your audience, right? They're 3 people, your audience to the news that I'm going to say. Bad news, kids. We can't go to Disney. They're not going to be happy about this news. This audience does not approve of your message. Big thumbs down. So that's the idea, right? It went over well. That means some message that you present to a specific audience, whether it's 3 people or 100 people, a group of people, a meeting, a presentation, something like that. This presentation is successful. It achieves what you want it to achieve. People like it. People clap. People say that was great. That was impactful. In which case you would say it went over well, or it didn't go over well, meaning that no one liked it. People were angry. Maybe you presented well, but the news is bad. So it's not only about how you present it. It's not about your style. It could be that. Maybe you get so nervous that you collapse on the floor and start twitching, right? It could be just that the thing that you say is not liked. Right? I presented it perfectly, but it's bad news and people don't like that. Like the kids with the Disney, right? We want to go to Disney. I'm sorry, we can't go to Disney because Perry the Pelican is sick and we need to take care of him this week. What? We'll have to reschedule next year. What? It didn't go over well. Your presentation went over well, but I was so nervous. Okay, so people liked it. It was impactful. Everyone said great job. But I want to say that in order to do that, I had to summon great strength and mental fortitude. But it still went well. I'm happy with it. Now, what's the difference between went well and went over well? Went well is just a broad description. I think it was good. Went over well emphasizes the reaction of the audience, the feeling of the audience. If I say it went over well, the audience was receptive of the message. They liked what they heard, and maybe they liked the presentation itself. Again, whether you consider the audience to be one person telling one person something, good news or bad news, an idea, or 1,000 people, it doesn't really matter, okay? So I challenge you to try to go over in all of the different ways that I did. Follow my examples. Try to make your own. If you can make examples based on what you learn, then you have not only output, not only input, but input and output. That's what you want, right? It would be hard to do output without input. You want output and input. If you just learn something, you're going to forget it pretty quickly. It's going to be gone within a week, several days. But if you learn something and then you make something with what you learn, you write down your own examples, you practice examples based on my examples, it's going to stick, right? Especially if you do it today and do it tomorrow. You're going to remember all of the different uses of go over, and that's going to be something that you can then use in your real life, which is what learning English is all about, communicating and expressing yourself effectively. So share those with me. You can share them with me in the comments. You can share them with me if you want on the website, or you could share them with me in the Discord if you want. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also, check out my free course in the links in the description.